In the vast, intricate ecosystem of human governance, there exist chambers of profound secrecy, repositories where the narratives of power are meticulously guarded, their contents shielded from the public gaze. These are the veiled archives, the silent heart of national security, where truths are classified, redacted, and sometimes buried for generations. Here, history is not merely recorded, it is curated, controlled, and contained. The decision to keep a secret is, in itself, an act of immense power, a declaration that some knowledge is too volatile, too dangerous for the open air of public discourse, a necessary shadow cast to protect the delicate balance of order and stability. But like any ecosystem, the world of politics is subject to sudden, unpredictable shifts. A change in leadership, a new prevailing wind, can cause the deepest, most fortified vaults to tremble. During the presidency of Donald J. Trump, a period defined by its disruption of established norms, the locks on some of these vaults were tested, and a select few were prized open. It was a moment of unprecedented transparency, or perhaps, unprecedented political theater. Documents once destined to remain in perpetual twilight were suddenly thrust into the harsh glare of the 21st century news cycle, their long-held secrets exposed to a world unprepared for their implications. What emerged from these declassified files was a tapestry of intrigue, a complex and often unsettling portrait of the hidden machinery of state. They told stories of surveillance that stretched the boundaries of legality, of intelligence agencies operating in the morally ambiguous spaces between national security and individual liberty. These were not simple historical records, they were living documents, their revelations echoing through the corridors of power, challenging long-held assumptions and igniting fierce debates. The release of each file was a seismic event, sending shockwaves through the very foundations of the political landscape. This is the story of three such declassifications, three moments when the curtain was pulled back, however briefly, on the inner workings of the world's most powerful government. We will journey into the heart of these documents, exploring the shocking truths they revealed about covert operations, political maneuvering, and the relentless pursuit of power. This is an examination of how these revelations, unearthed during a turbulent era, have forever altered our understanding of privacy, the nature of truth, and the enduring, often invisible forces that shape our world. The political landscape of Washington, D.C. is a complex habitat, governed by unspoken rules and delicate alliances. It was within this environment that Congressman Devin Nunes, then chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, became a figure of central importance. Often seen moving through the secure corridors of Capitol Hill, attending clandestine security briefings, he was a gatekeeper to some of the nation's most sensitive information. His actions, once confined to the quiet, methodical world of intelligence oversight, were about to detonate a political firestorm that would be broadcast relentlessly across the airwaves, particularly on channels like Fox News, which amplified the coming conflict to a national audience. The stage was set for a confrontation of unprecedented scale. The object at the center of this storm was a 4-page memorandum, a document that promised to expose the secret origins of an investigation that had captivated and divided the nation. The memo, authored by Nunes and his staff, was said to contain explosive details about the surveillance of a Trump campaign associate. Its impending release created a schism within the government itself, pitting a faction of the legislative branch against the nation's premier law enforcement and intelligence agencies, who warned that its publication would cause grave damage to national security. The tension was palpable, a low hum of anticipation that vibrated through the Capitol. The debate over the memo's release was not merely a procedural squabble, it was a battle over narrative, a struggle to define the very nature of the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. For supporters, the memo was a key to unlocking a conspiracy, a Rosetta Stone that would reveal a deep state plot against a sitting president. For detractors, it was a dangerous piece of political propaganda, a cherry-picked collection of facts designed to mislead the public and obstruct justice. Finally, on February 2, 2018, the seal was broken. Against the strenuous objections of the FBI and the Department of Justice, President Trump authorized the declassification and release of the Nunes memo. The document, once a closely guarded secret, was suddenly available to the world, its contents spilling out into the public domain. The quiet corridors of intelligence had given way to the cacophony of the 24-hour news cycle, and the fallout from this single act of declassification was only just beginning to unfold, promising to reshape the political terrain for years to come. At the very heart of the Nunes memo lay another document, one that had already achieved a kind of mythic status in the annals of political intrigue, the Steele dossier. This collection of raw intelligence reports compiled by former British spy Christopher Steele was a lurid and explosive account of alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. The dossier had circulated in the shadows for months, a source of whispered rumors and fevered speculation among journalists and political operatives. It was a document of unverified claims, a complex web of sources and allegations that painted a damning picture. The Nunes memo alleged that this controversial dossier was not just a peripheral piece of political opposition research, but a central and indispensable element in the government's application to surveil a U.S. citizen. Specifically, it claimed that the FBI and the Department of Justice had relied heavily on Steele's uncorroborated findings to obtain a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA warrant against Carter Page, a former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. This was a startling accusation, suggesting that the nation's most powerful surveillance tools were deployed on the basis of politically motivated and unverified information. The memo detailed how the application for the FISA warrant, presented to a secret court, allegedly failed to disclose the full story behind the dossier. It argued that the court was not informed that the research was funded by the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign. This omission, the memo contended, was a critical deception. It painted a picture of a biased process, where senior officials, driven by a political agenda, presented a skewed version of the facts to a court that operates in complete secrecy, stripping away the checks and balances that are fundamental to the American legal system. The implication was profound and deeply unsettling. It suggested that the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, a body created to target foreign spies and terrorists, may have been weaponized for domestic political purposes. The memo argued that the legal threshold for surveilling an American citizen, a process that requires probable cause to believe they are an agent of a foreign power, had been corrupted. The shadow of the Steele dossier, according to Nunes, had darkened the halls of justice, raising fundamental questions about the integrity of the nation's most secret legal proceedings. The release of the memo provided President Trump with what he viewed as concrete evidence for a claim he had been making for months. From the bully pulpit of his Twitter account and in rallies before thousands of supporters, he had repeatedly decried the investigation into his campaign as nothing more than a politically motivated witch hunt. He portrayed himself as the victim of a shadowy cabal of unelected bureaucrats, a deep state conspiracy determined to undermine his presidency and overturn the will of the American people. The Nunes memo was, in his eyes, the ultimate vindication. He seized upon its contents with vigor, tweeting that the memo totally vindicates Trump in probe and accusing top leadership at the FBI and the Department of Justice of playing politics with sacred intelligence processes. This was not just a defense, it was a counteroffensive. The president used the memo to go on the attack, attempting to discredit the very institutions that were investigating him. He framed the conflict as a struggle between a populist, outsider president and a corrupt, entrenched establishment that would stop at nothing to maintain its grip on power. This narrative resonated powerfully with his base of supporters, who saw the memo as undeniable proof of the conspiracy they had long suspected. Protests and rallies were organized, with demonstrators holding signs that echoed the president's language, demanding an end to the witch hunt and calling for the prosecution of the officials named in the memo. The document became a symbol of defiance, a rallying cry for those who felt that the system was rigged against them and their chosen leader. The political divisions in the country, already deep, were carved into chasms. For opponents of the president, however, the witch hunt narrative was a dangerous diversion. They saw the president's attacks on the FBI and the Justice Department as an unprecedented assault on the rule of law. They argued that the memo was a smokescreen, a deliberate attempt to obstruct the investigation and distract from the serious questions about Russian interference. The declassification had not brought clarity. Instead, it had poured fuel on an already raging fire, transforming a complex counterintelligence investigation into a raw and bitter partisan war fought in the court of public opinion. Beyond the immediate political theater, the declassification of the Nunes memo forced a much broader and more uncomfortable conversation upon the American public. It dragged the obscure and highly secretive world of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act into the mainstream spotlight. For decades, FISA had operated almost entirely in the shadows, a powerful tool designed in the Cold War era to track foreign agents on U.S. soil. Its proceedings were secret, its rulings were secret, and its very existence was known to only a relative few. Suddenly it was the subject of primetime news analysis and heated debate. The memo raised fundamental questions about the immense power wielded by the surveillance state and the potential for its abuse. The core issue was the balance between security and liberty. How much privacy should a citizen be expected to sacrifice in the name of national security? The memo suggested that this balance had been dangerously skewed, that the mechanisms designed to protect Americans from foreign threats could be turned inward, used to target political opponents based on flimsy or politically biased evidence. It was, honestly, a chilling prospect that evoked fears of a government with unchecked power to spy on its own people. The controversy highlighted the inherent vulnerability of the FISA process. Operating outside the traditional adversarial court system, the FISA court hears arguments from only one side, the government. The target of the surveillance has no representative, no opportunity to challenge the evidence presented against them. The Nunes memo argued that this one-sided system was ripe for manipulation. If officials could present a partial or misleading case to the court, as the memo alleged, then the court's role as a guardian of civil liberties was effectively nullified, turning it into little more than a rubber stamp for the intelligence community. This debate was not new, but the Nunes memo gave it a new and potent urgency. The spectacle of a sitting president accusing his own Justice Department of defrauding a secret court to spy on his campaign was a watershed moment. It forced citizens to confront the reality of the vast surveillance apparatus that had been constructed in the name of protecting them. The declassification revealed that the potential for abuse was not a theoretical concern, but a tangible threat, sparking a renewed and critical examination of the laws that govern the secret world of government surveillance. The shockwaves from the memo's release radiated through the institutions at the heart of the controversy. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, long regarded as the nation's premier law enforcement agency, found its credibility under sustained and public assault from the highest office in the land. The memo effectively accused the FBI of acting not as impartial investigators, but as partisan actors who had allowed political bias to corrupt a sensitive counterintelligence operation. This was a devastating blow to the Bureau's reputation for integrity and professionalism, built over generations. In the days and weeks that followed, the fallout was swift and severe. Key figures involved in the Russia investigation, some of whom were named or implicated in the memo, faced intense scrutiny and public condemnation. FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe was fired just days before his scheduled retirement. The text messages of FBI agent Peter Strzok and FBI lawyer Lisa Page, which expressed anti-Trump sentiments, were seized upon as further proof of institutional bias, leading to their eventual removal from the investigation and their departure from the Bureau. A purge seemed to be underway. This created a climate of intense pressure and uncertainty within the intelligence and law enforcement communities. Agents and analysts, accustomed to working in secrecy and according to established protocols, suddenly found their work, their motives, and their personal communications subject to political attack. The declassification created a chilling effect, raising concerns that officials would become hesitant to pursue sensitive investigations, particularly those involving powerful political figures, for fear of career-ending retribution. The very act of doing their jobs had become politically perilous. The episode left deep and lasting scars on the relationship between the White House and its intelligence agencies. A bond of trust, essential for the effective functioning of government and the protection of national security, had been fractured, perhaps irreparably. The president viewed the agencies with suspicion, as remnants of a deep state out to get him. The agencies, in turn, were forced into a defensive crouch, their leaders compelled to issue public statements defending their integrity against attacks from the very president they were sworn to serve. The institutional landscape was, in many ways, forever changed. In the final analysis, the legacy of the Nunes memo is not one of clarity, but of chaos. It did not settle the debate over the Russia investigation, it actually intensified it, providing a potent weapon for one side while being dismissed as a deceptive sham by the other. The memo itself was later rebutted by Democrats on the Intelligence Committee, who released their own document arguing that the FBI had acted appropriately and had, in fact, disclosed the political nature of the Steele dossier to the FISA court. The truth became lost in a fog of competing narratives, a sort of he said, she said battle fought with classified information. The Inspector General of the Department of Justice, Michael Horowitz, later conducted a comprehensive review of the Carter-Page FISA applications. His report, released in December 2019, was a complex document that offered ammunition to both sides. It concluded that the investigation was not initiated out of political bias, debunking the core deep state conspiracy theory. However, it also uncovered serious performance failures and significant inaccuracies and omissions in the FISA applications, confirming some of the procedural concerns that the Nunes memo had first raised, albeit without the partisan framing. The long-term impact of the memo was to further erode public trust in institutions that are vital to a functioning democracy. Trust in the FBI, the Department of Justice, the media, and even the process of congressional oversight plummeted as the saga unfolded. The episode demonstrated how classified intelligence, once the exclusive domain of national security professionals, could be declassified and weaponized in the political arena, used not to inform the public but to inflame partisan divisions and advance a specific political agenda. It set a, dangerous precedent for future conflicts. Ultimately, the Nunes memo serves as a powerful case study in the politics of secrecy and disclosure. It reveals that the act of declassification is never neutral. It is an act of power, capable of shaping public perception and altering the course of political events. The memo shook the Trump era by exposing the raw, bitter, and deeply personal nature of the conflict between a disruptive president and the established order. It left behind a legacy of suspicion and division, a stark reminder that in the battle over information, the truth itself can become the first casualty. The city of Dallas, Texas, holds a permanent somber place in the American psyche. It's a landscape haunted by a single catastrophic event. The grassy knoll, the Texas School Book Depository, Dealey Plaza. These are not just locations, they're scenes from a national trauma, forever frozen in time on November 22, 1963. The grainy, silent frames of the Zapruder film play on a loop in the collective memory, a silent testament to the moment a president was struck down in broad daylight and an age of innocence was violently brought to an end. For more than half a century, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy has been a source of endless fascination and deep-seated suspicion. The official conclusion of the Warren Commission that a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, was solely responsible has never satisfied a large portion of the public. This skepticism has fueled a sprawling cottage industry of conspiracy theories, a labyrinth of alternative narratives involving the mafia, Cuban exiles, the Soviet Union, and even America's own intelligence agencies. At the heart of this enduring mystery lies the belief that the government is hiding something. Into this deeply entrenched culture of distrust stepped President Donald Trump. True to his brand as a political outsider willing to challenge established orthodoxies, he made a bold promise. He announced his intention to finally unlock the remaining government secrets surrounding the assassination, to authorize the release of thousands of pages of documents that had been kept classified for decades. It was a move that electrified both historians and conspiracy theorists alike, a promise of ultimate transparency that held the potential to finally answer the questions that have plagued the nation for generations. The anticipation was immense. The 1992 JFK Records Act had mandated the release of all related documents within 25 years, a deadline that was now set to expire in October of 2017. President Trump positioned himself as the champion of disclosure, tweeting, "The long-anticipated release of the JFK files will take place tomorrow." So interesting. He was seemingly ready to pull back the curtain on one of the darkest chapters in American history, to let the public judge the evidence for themselves and perhaps to finally bring a sense of closure to a wound that has never truly healed. On the appointed day, October 26, 2017, a torrent of information was unleashed. The National Archives uploaded a massive trove of 2,891 documents to its website, a digital flood of once secret files for the entire world to see. It was a moment historians had been awaiting for a quarter of a century. The files were a dizzying collection of memos, reports, and cables from the CIA, FBI, State Department, and other government bodies, their pages filled with the dense, typewritten jargon of Cold War bureaucracy. The floodgates of history appeared to be swinging wide open. However, the promise of complete transparency was not entirely fulfilled. In a last-minute reversal, President Trump bowed to pressure from his intelligence agencies, primarily the CIA and the FBI. Citing concerns for national security, the agencies argued that the release of certain information could harm intelligence operations, reveal the identities of living sources, and compromise national security methods that are still in use today. The president, who had championed full disclosure, was now forced to hedge, agreeing to a temporary withholding of a smaller but potentially crucial set of documents. This partial release immediately tempered the initial excitement with a fresh wave of suspicion. For those who had long believed in a cover-up, the decision to withhold any files at all was seen as definitive proof that the government still had something to hide. Why, after more than 50 years, would the release of information about a 1963 assassination pose a threat to 21st century national security? The official explanation seemed thin, reigniting the very conspiracy theories the release was meant to quell. The act of withholding became, for many, more significant than the act of releasing. The result was a frustrating and tantalizing puzzle. Researchers, journalists, and amateur sleuths began the painstaking process of sifting through the newly available material, a monumental task of connecting dots scattered across thousands of pages of raw intelligence. They were searching for a key, a smoking gun that would definitively solve the case. But the withheld files loomed large over their efforts, a black hole of missing information that ensured any conclusions drawn from the released documents would forever be incomplete. always shadowed by the question of what secrets were still being kept. As researchers delved into the newly declassified files, the enigmatic figure of Lee Harvey Oswald came into sharper yet more perplexing focus. The documents did not overturn the official conclusion that he was the assassin, but they added layers of complexity and intrigue to his character and activities in the months leading up to the assassination. He was not simply a disgruntled loner, but a figure who had repeatedly appeared on the radar of American intelligence, a man whose movements were tracked, whose mail was opened, and whose name appeared in CIA and FBI files long before he aimed a rifle from the depository window. One of the most startling revelations came from a memo written by J. Edgar Hoover, the long-serving director of the FBI. The memo, dated the day after the assassination, described how the Bureau had received a call at its Dallas office from a man speaking in a calm voice, claiming to be a member of a committee organized to kill Oswald. The call came just hours before Oswald himself was murdered by Jack Ruby while in police custody. This document raised profound questions about potential accomplices and the shocking failure of law enforcement to protect their star prisoner. The files also painted a more detailed picture of Oswald's mysterious trip to Mexico City just weeks before the assassination. During this trip, he visited both the Cuban and Soviet embassies, allegedly seeking visas. The declassified documents confirmed that the CIA had him under surveillance during this period, monitoring his communications and meetings. They detailed his contacts with known KGB agents, including a consular officer who was part of the KGB's department responsible for assassinations. This placed the official lone gunman in direct contact with spies from America's greatest adversary. This information deepened the mystery rather than solving it. Why would a lone wolf actor with no connections be meeting with KGB agents? Was he attempting to defect, or was he part of a larger plot? The files showed that U.S. intelligence was aware of Oswald's activities and his communist sympathies, yet he was still able to purchase a rifle and gain access to a building overlooking the presidential motorcade route. The Oswald that emerged from the files was a figure far more connected and monitored than the public had ever been led to believe, making the official narrative seem increasingly inadequate. Buried within the vast collection of declassified documents was a single memo that sent a ripple of excitement through the community of assassination researchers. It was a note from the CIA to the director of the FBI, dated November 26, 1963, just 4 days after the tragedy in Dallas. The memo detailed a curious and unsettling event that had occurred in the United Kingdom. It stated that a senior reporter at the Cambridge News, a small provincial newspaper, had received an anonymous phone call. The call came approximately 25 minutes before President Kennedy was shot. The anonymous caller, according to the reporter, simply told him to call the American embassy in London for some big news and then hung up. The reporter did not think much of it at the time, dismissing it as a prank or a trivial matter. It was only after the news of the assassination broke, shocking the world, that the reporter and his colleagues realized the chilling significance of the call. They immediately reported the incident to the local police, who in turn alerted the British intelligence service, MI5. MI5, as detailed in the memo, passed this information along to the CIA. The document itself is brief and clinical, but its implications are immense. It suggests that someone, somewhere in the United Kingdom, had prior knowledge of the assassination. The timing of the call, just before the shots were fired, is too precise to be a coincidence. It points towards the existence of a conspiracy, a network of individuals who were aware of the plot and, for some unknown reason, decided to tip off a small English newspaper. This single piece of information, hidden from public view for over 50 years, fundamentally challenges the lone gunman theory. A lone, disgruntled Marxist in Dallas would have no reason or means to arrange for an anonymous call to a British journalist. The memo provides a tantalizing breadcrumb, a thread leading away from Dealey Plaza and across the Atlantic. It raises more questions than it answers. Who was the caller? Who were they working for? And why did they choose to make that specific call? A cryptic warning that could only be understood in hindsight. The declassified files did not provide a new culprit for the assassination, but they did lend significant weight to some of the most prominent long-standing theories, particularly those involving organized crime and the Central Intelligence Agency. The documents are littered with references to covert operations, secret plots, and unsavory alliances that blurred the lines between the government and the criminal underworld. They reveal a secret history of the 1960s, a world where the CIA was willing to make deals with the devil to achieve its foreign policy aims. One set of files provided further detail on the CIA's plots to assassinate Cuban leader Fidel Castro, an operation codenamed Operation Mongoose. The documents confirmed that the agency had actively recruited top mafia figures including Sam Giancana and Santo Trafficante Jr. to carry out the hit. The government's top spy agency was in bed with the country's most notorious gangsters, united by a common enemy. This alliance, once the stuff of rumor, was laid bare in the government's own records, showing the extreme measures the agency was willing to take. This confirmed connection is crucial for many researchers. The theory goes that after Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, the president's brother, launched an aggressive and highly successful war on the mafia, the mob bosses felt betrayed. They had helped the CIA, and now the president's own family was trying to destroy them. In this narrative, the assassination was an act of revenge, a brutal message from the criminal underworld. The files, by confirming the CIA Mafia alliance, provide a plausible motive and demonstrate that these gangsters had connections deep within the corridors of power. Furthermore, the documents revealed a deep-seated animosity towards President Kennedy from within the CIA itself. Many in the agency blamed Kennedy for the disastrous failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion, believing he had lost his nerve and abandoned the anti-Castro exiles on the beaches of Cuba. The files contain memos expressing this bitterness. While this falls short of proving a CIA plot, it establishes a powerful motive of institutional animosity, suggesting that powerful figures within the intelligence community viewed the president as weak, naive, and a threat to their operations. In the end, the great declassification of 2017 did not deliver the smoking gun that so many had hoped for. There was no single document, no confession or definitive memo that solved the crime of the century once and for all. The central mystery of who, besides Oswald, was responsible for the death of John F. Kennedy remains officially unsolved. The files did not provide a neat conclusion or a final chapter to this painful national story. The promise of ultimate closure remained unfulfilled, leaving a lingering sense of anticlimax. What the files did provide, however, was an overwhelming abundance of smoke. They filled in countless gaps in the historical record, adding rich, disturbing context to the events surrounding the assassination. They confirmed the existence of secret plots, unsettling alliances, and institutional failures that were far more extensive than the public had been told. The declassification demonstrated that the environment in which the assassination occurred was thick with conspiracy, intrigue, and violence, making the lone gunman theory seem to many more implausible than ever before. The release confirmed that Lee Harvey Oswald was not an unknown quantity, but a figure of intense interest to U.S. intelligence. It confirmed that the government was working with the very mobsters who had a motive for revenge against the Kennedys. It confirmed that there was deep animosity towards the president within his own intelligence agency. It confirmed that someone, somewhere, had foreknowledge of the attack. Each of these revelations is a plume of smoke rising from the embers of the past, suggesting a fire is burning somewhere just out of sight. The legacy of the 2017 JFK Files release is therefore a complex one. It was a landmark act of transparency that simultaneously deepened the mystery it was meant to solve. It debunked the idea of a simple, straightforward crime while failing to provide a clear alternative. The declassification shook the Trump era by reminding the nation of its deepest and most enduring conspiracy, revealing that even after more than half a century, the full truth about the death of a president remains elusive, shrouded in a fog of official secrecy and a tantalizing abundance of smoke. Here, in the quiet suburbs of Abbottabad, Pakistan, a seemingly unremarkable compound stands against the backdrop of the Hindu Kush. For years, it was a place of secrets, a fortress of solitude hidden in plain sight. Its high walls and barbed wire spoke of a desire for privacy, but they concealed a reality far more significant. This was the final habitat of the world's most hunted man, Osama bin Laden, a predator who, for a decade, had evaded the most sophisticated tracking efforts on the planet. He had become a ghost, a myth, a phantom that haunted the corridors of power and the minds of millions across the globe, a symbol of a global conflict that defined an era. The ecosystem of this compound was meticulously controlled, designed for one purpose: survival. It was a self-contained world, cut off from the global network of information and communication that its primary occupants so vehemently opposed, yet sought to manipulate from afar. Within these walls, a life of isolated routine unfolded, a stark contrast to the global chaos bin Laden had orchestrated. The daily rhythms were dictated not by the rising and setting of the sun, but by the ever-present threat of discovery. Every shadow, every distant sound was a potential harbinger of the end, a constant pressure that shaped every action and every decision within this concrete sanctuary. The raid, when it came, was a swift and decisive intrusion into this carefully managed environment. On May 2, 2011, under the cloak of darkness, elite hunters, the U.S. Navy SEALs, descended from the sky. They were the apex predators of this modern conflict, equipped with technology and training that made them specters in the night. The operation was a marvel of precision and lethality, a culmination of years of patient, painstaking intelligence gathering. The walls that had provided sanctuary for so long were breached in moments, shattering the illusion of safety, and bringing the long hunt to its dramatic and final conclusion. And in the aftermath, as the dust settled, the true treasure was revealed. Not gold, not weapons, but information. A vast trove of digital and physical documents, a digital fossil record of a hidden life. The commandos worked with clinical efficiency, extracting hard drives, thumb drives, written journals, and letters. This was the brain of the organism, the neural network of a global terror enterprise. Each file, each document, was a piece of a puzzle, a window into the mind of a man who had reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the 21st century. The hunt for the man was over, the hunt for understanding had just begun. The sheer volume of the material recovered was staggering. Nearly 500,000 individual files, a digital mountain of data that represented the final years of a clandestine existence. This was not merely the correspondence of a fugitive, it was the archive of a shadow government, the library of a global insurgency. The Central Intelligence Agency, the new custodians of this hoard, faced an immense task. It was akin to discovering a lost city, its language and customs waiting to be deciphered. Each file had to be cataloged, translated, and analyzed, a process that would take years of dedicated work by a small army of intelligence specialists and linguists. In November of 2017, during the Trump administration, a significant portion of this digital trove was declassified and released to the public. The decision, driven by a new CIA director's commitment to transparency, pulled back the curtain on this hidden world. For the first time, academics, journalists, and the public could gaze directly into the operational heart of Al-Qaeda. It was an unprecedented release, offering a raw, unfiltered look at the inner workings of the organization. The files provided a ground-level view of its strategies, its fears, its internal disputes, and its grand, terrifying ambitions for the future of its long war. The collection revealed a complex and often contradictory portrait of its central figure. Here was Osama bin Laden, the global jihadist, meticulously managing the minutiae of his vast terror network. But alongside the strategic documents and ideological treatises were far more personal artifacts. His private journal, filled with reflections on the unfolding Arab Spring, revealed a leader grappling with a world that was changing without him. He was keenly aware of his own diminishing influence, a formidable predator watching his territory shrink and his authority challenged by new emerging threats and shifting allegiances within the global jihadist movement. And then there were the oddities, the unexpected fragments of a life lived in extreme isolation. The collection included Hollywood films, children's cartoons like Tom and Jerry, and even video games. These items paint a picture not just of a terrorist mastermind, but of a family man, raising children and grandchildren within the confines of a high-security prison of his own making. It is a jarring juxtaposition, the mundane seated beside the monstrous. It reminds us that even those who commit acts of unimaginable evil exist within a web of human relationships, their lives composed of the same small, everyday details as our own. Deep within the digital archives, the strategic mind of Osama bin Laden is laid bare. We see a leader obsessed with the image and branding of his organization. The documents reveal meticulous instructions on media strategy, dictating the precise messaging to be used in propaganda videos and public statements. He understood with chilling clarity the power of narrative. He was not just waging a war of bombs and bullets, but a war of ideas, fought on the battleground of global perception. He sought to control the story, to shape the very language used to describe his cause, knowing that victory depended on winning hearts and minds. The files also reveal a man deeply engaged in the day-to-day management of his global franchise. There are detailed communications with affiliates scattered across the globe, from Yemen to Somalia. He offers guidance, settles disputes, and micromanages operational planning with the attention to detail of a corporate CEO. He critiques attack plans, suggests new targets, and worries endlessly about operational security. This was not a reclusive figurehead, but an active, hands-on commander, desperately trying to steer his scattered forces from his isolated perch in Abbottabad, a spider at the center of a vast and tangled web. One of the most chilling discoveries was the clear and unambiguous planning for future attacks against Western interests. The documents contain detailed discussions about targeting American and European embassies, replicating the devastating 1998 attacks in Kenya and Tanzania. There were also explicit instructions to his followers to find ways to assassinate President Barack Obama and General David Petraeus, whom he saw as the two primary heads of the unbeliever snake. The desire for spectacular violence had not waned with time. It had merely become more focused, more patient, and more strategically ambitious. Perhaps most revealing of all are bin Laden's plans for the future of his movement, what some have called Al-Qaeda 2.0. He envisioned a leaner, more decentralized organization, one less reliant on a central command structure. He encouraged followers in the West to carry out lone wolf attacks, providing ideological justification and tactical encouragement. He was adapting to the new security environment, evolving his methods to ensure the survival and continuation of his global jihad. The files show a leader not in retreat, but in a state of strategic metamorphosis, planting the seeds for a new generation of conflict. The declassified files offer a rare and intimate glimpse into the domestic life that unfolded within the compound's walls. This was not just a command center, it was a home. The digital hoard included the wedding video of his son, Hamza bin Laden, a young man being groomed to inherit his father's mantle. The video shows a celebration, but it is one tinged with the constant undercurrent of paranoia and confinement. It is a strange fusion of a normal family milestone, and the extraordinary circumstances of their existence. A wedding held in the shadow of a global manhunt, a celebration within a gilded cage. We see evidence of children's education, with bin Laden himself seemingly taking a direct role. There are spelling and grammar exercises, religious texts, and lessons in history, a history told exclusively through the prism of his own radical ideology. He was not just raising children, he was cultivating the next generation of believers, indoctrinating them from their earliest moments. The compound was a school as much as a fortress, an incubator for an ideology he hoped would outlive him, ensuring his legacy would be carried forward by his own flesh and blood. The presence of so many children's movies and cartoons speaks to the strange normality they tried to construct. Tom and Jerry, Ice Age, and Disney's Cars were part of the digital library, likely used to entertain the youngest residents of this isolated world. It is a profoundly humanizing detail, yet also deeply unsettling. It illustrates the universal need for distraction and entertainment, a need that persists even in the most extreme and ideologically charged environments. These cartoons were a small portal to a world the children of the compound would never truly know, a world their father was dedicated to destroying. This domestic picture complicates our understanding of the man. It forces us to see him not just as a symbol of terror, but as a father, a husband, and a teacher, albeit one who governed his family with the same rigid ideology he sought to impose upon the world. This duality is perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all. It is a reminder that the capacity for great evil does not exist in a vacuum. It coexists with the routines, relationships, and responsibilities of everyday life, making it not more understandable but somehow even more profoundly terrifying and alien. For the global intelligence community, the bin Laden files were the equivalent of the Rosetta Stone. They provided an unprecedented opportunity to map the complex social and operational networks of al-Qaeda. Analysts could trace lines of communication, identify key nodes and facilitators, and understand the intricate financial pathways that sustained the organization. It was like switching on a light in a dark room, suddenly revealing the hidden architecture of the enemy. This information proved invaluable, leading directly to operations that further degraded and dismantled the core leadership of al-Qaeda in the years that followed the raid. The documents also provided a crucial understanding of the strategic thinking behind the organization's actions. By studying bin Laden's own words and plans, intelligence agencies could better anticipate future moves. They learned what he feared, what he valued, and how he perceived the world. This psychological insight is a rare and precious commodity in the world of counterterrorism. It allows for a more proactive and predictive approach, shifting the focus from simply reacting to attacks to preempting them by understanding the doctrine that drives them, a critical advantage in this long and shadowy war. Furthermore, the files shed light on the fraught and complex relationships between al-Qaeda and other regional actors, including state sponsors and rival jihadist groups. The correspondence revealed tensions, alliances of convenience, and deep-seated mistrust. Of particular interest was the nuanced and often strained relationship with Iran, a Shia power that held some of bin Laden's family and senior al-Qaeda operatives in a form of protective custody. Understanding these delicate and often contradictory relationships is essential to navigating the treacherous geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and South Asia. The release of these files under the Trump administration, however, was not without controversy. While lauded by some as a victory for transparency, many within the intelligence and national security communities expressed grave concerns. They argued that releasing such a vast, uncurated trove of raw intelligence could inadvertently expose sources and methods, providing adversaries with a roadmap of how the United States gathers information. It highlighted the perennial tension between the public's right to know and the government's need to protect its most sensitive and vital national security secrets. The legacy of the bin Laden files extends far beyond the intelligence community. It has reshaped our understanding of one of the most significant historical figures of our time. The documents strip away the mythology, revealing a man who was both a strategic visionary and a prisoner of his own obsessive ideology. He was a global celebrity of terror who spent his final years in near-total isolation, a leader who commanded a worldwide network through couriers because he feared the very technology he used to spread his message. This complex, contradictory portrait is perhaps the truest one we have. The files serve as a stark and enduring warning about the nature of future threats. Bin Laden's plans for a decentralized, inspiration-based model of terrorism have, in many ways, come to pass. The rise of ISIS and the proliferation of lone actor attacks in Western cities are the direct descendants of the strategy he was formulating in his Abbottabad hideout. The threat has evolved, becoming more diffuse, more viral, and in some ways even harder to detect and combat. The predator has changed its hunting strategy, a chilling evolution in this ongoing struggle for survival. The decision to release the files also speaks to a broader shift in the information age. In an era of leaks and whistleblowers, governments are under increasing pressure to be transparent. The declassification of the bin Laden archive was a strategic move, an attempt to control the narrative by releasing the information directly rather than waiting for it to emerge in uncontrolled fragments. It represents a new front in the information war, where transparency itself can be wielded as a weapon, shaping public perception and defining the official historical record for future generations. Ultimately, the compound in Abbottabad is gone, demolished by Pakistani authorities. The man who lived there is gone, his body buried at sea, but his ideas, meticulously documented in this vast digital archive, remain. They are a ghost in the machine, a lingering shadow that continues to influence global events. The files are a testament to the enduring power of ideology and a solemn reminder that while you can kill a man, killing an idea is a far more difficult and perhaps impossible task. The echoes of Abbottabad will be with us for a long time to come. The Trump presidency was one of disruption and, in some cases, exposure. A period of immense turbulence where the established order of the political ecosystem was shaken to its core. These declassified documents, released amidst the storms of controversy and debate, were not just fleeting headlines in a relentless news cycle. They were something more profound, more lasting. They were windows, rare, and at times startlingly clear apertures that allowed us to peer into worlds that are, by their very nature, designed to remain hidden from our view. Windows into the silent, unseen machinery of power. We glimpsed the secret courts where the legal boundaries of surveillance are drawn and redrawn, a world of shadows where the rights of the individual are weighed against the security of the state. We saw the inner sanctum of a global terror network, a view into the mind of a man who sought to bring civilization to its knees. And we looked back into the murky depths of our own history at the enduring, painful questions surrounding the death of a president, questions that still resonate with unanswered doubt and suspicion. These documents reveal how narratives are built, fortified, and on occasion, broken. They show us that history is not a static, settled thing but a contested territory, constantly being shaped and reshaped by what we are permitted to know. The official story is just that, one story. Beneath it, there are countless other versions, other truths, lying dormant in classified archives, waiting for a moment of political expediency or genuine transparency to bring them into the light. These releases were such moments, fracturing the smooth surface of the accepted past. And in that fracturing, perhaps there is a glimmer of hope, a confirmation that even in the most tightly controlled systems, in the deepest vaults of secrecy, the truth retains a certain insistent energy. It pushes against the boundaries that confine it, seeking out the cracks, however small. It is a fragile and often beleaguered force, but a persistent one. And maybe, just maybe, it shows us how the truth, against all odds, still fights its way to the surface, still struggles to get out. The instinct for knowledge, for understanding, is as powerful as any in nature.
It took only hours after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy for the speculation to begin. Cuba, the KGB, the CIA, and the mob among the potential culprits, according to conspiracy theories that persist to this day. Over the last 61 years, most of the government's documents related to the assassination have been made public, pointing to Lee Harvey Oswald as the gunman acting alone. This week, following an order from President Trump, the National Archives posted a final batch of files. So what did we learn? And does it change what we already knew? NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian has our Sunday focus.
November 22nd, 1963, one of the darkest days in American history. President John F. Kennedy shot to death in Dallas.
Two priests who were with President Kennedy say he is dead.
Police quickly arrest 24-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald, saying he fired the fatal shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. But just 2 days later, any chance to interrogate Oswald is extinguished when a local nightclub owner with underworld ties fatally shoots the former Marine during a jail transfer.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
Almost immediately, conspiracy theories began to swirl. In 1964, an investigation by the Warren Commission concluded that Oswald was the lone assassin and had no help. But what was quickly seen as the commission's rush to judgment fueled alternate explanations that have run wild ever since. Was Oswald really the only shooter? Was he working for the Russians or even the CIA?
From which it later falls out.
Oliver Stone's hit 1991 movie JFK knitted together many of the darkest conspiracy theories, portraying Oswald as a scapegoat and patsy used to cover up the involvement of former CIA Director Allen Dulles, fired after the Bay of Pigs disaster.
I never realized Kennedy was so dangerous to the establishment.
Advocates of this view have long said the proof was sitting in buried files the government was keeping secret. This week, President Trump ordered the release of what are believed to be the last remaining classified documents related to the JFK assassination, more than 80,000 records in total.
People have been waiting for decades for this. It's going to be very interesting.
So far, though, scholars pouring through the documents say they have seen no hard evidence to support a larger conspiracy to kill Kennedy. Still, they say the records reveal new details about just how much the CIA knew about Oswald, who at one point had defected to the Soviet Union.
Wonderful job.
Larry Sabato, who heads the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia, has been studying the JFK assassination for decades.
The CIA lied and lied and lied about what they knew about Oswald. Personally, I think it's unlikely that rogue elements did it, but I do have that suspicion.
Sabato's students have been combing through the records for clues.
We don't necessarily know what went down that day, but at least for me and a lot of the other people in this class, we have a lot of questions and we don't think the story that we've been told is the full story.
And many would agree. According to a 2023 Gallup poll, 2/3 of Americans believe Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone.
I try to draw parallels between the cynicism that developed and the conspiracy theories that developed because of the Kennedy assassination with hundreds of conspiracy theories that we've had to deal with since. You know, once people lose trust in government, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to restore that.
The end of Camelot, the death of a young president, and a mystery that may endure forever.
And Ken joins me now live from Washington. Ken, good morning. First of all, what an assignment for those students at UVA. Amazing. So how long will it take to get through all the new documents? And at the end of the day, do we expect any new revelations?
Well, Larry Sabato and others tell me it will take months to get through everything, Willie. And, you know, there have been some criticisms about how it all was released. For example, including unredacted Social Security numbers of some living people, a huge mistake that the Trump administration is now trying to fix. You know, as for bombshells, probably nothing that disproves the official story of the assassination, but I don't think we can rule out more revelations about the CIA. The documents have already revealed that the CIA was reading Americans' mail and had, quote, exceeded its mandate by breaking into the French consulate in D.C., to cite one example. There may be more of those sorts of revelations to come, Willie, which is undoubtedly why the CIA fought so hard to keep these records secret. Willie.
Almost all of the documents now are public, unlikely to quiet the conspiracy theories. So fascinating. Ken, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching. And don't forget, you can catch the Today Show every morning on NBC or take Today when you're on the go. Just follow the Today podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.